The dust had barely settled on her father's grave when Beatrice Thompson discovered that everything he had built, every acre of land and every head of cattle, now belonged to the lawyer who had promised to protect his legacy. She stood in the cramped office above the general store in Porterville, California, staring at the document that Harold Whitmore slid across his mahogany desk with fingers as pale and soft as bread dough. The afternoon sun of May 1878 slanted through the grimy window, illuminating the elaborate script that declared her father's estate transferred entirely to Whitmore himself, supposedly to settle outstanding legal fees that had somehow ballooned to match the exact value of everything Richard Thompson had owned. "This cannot be legal," Beatrice said, her voice steadier than her hands. She was 22 years old, had buried her father 3 days ago after a sudden fever took him, and now faced a future as empty as her purse. "My father would never have agreed to terms like this." Harold Whitmore leaned back in his leather chair, his round face arranged in an expression of practiced sympathy that never reached his eyes. "Miss Thompson, I understand your grief is making this difficult to process, but your father signed these documents himself. He came to me 6 months ago, desperately in need of legal representation for several matters. The fees accumulated as they do in complex cases. When he passed, God rest his soul, the debt remained. Under California law, I am entitled to claim the estate in settlement. What legal matters?" Beatrice demanded. "My father never mentioned any trouble. He ran his ranch honestly. He had no enemies, no disputes. Attorney-client privilege prevents me from discussing the details," Whitmore said smoothly. "But I assure you, everything was handled according to the law. I have documentation, all properly filed with the county. The ranch, the livestock, the house, all of it transfers to me as of today. I have been generous enough to give you until the end of the week to vacate the premises." Beatrice felt the room tilt slightly. The ranch was 40 miles south of Porterville, nestled in a valley where the grass grew thick, and the creek never ran dry even in the worst droughts. Her father had spent 20 years building it from nothing, had taught her to ride before she could properly walk, had shown her every fence line and water source, had promised her it would always be her home. "I want to see the original documents," she said. "The ones my father supposedly signed." "They are filed with the county courthouse," Whitmore replied. "You are welcome to examine them there, though I warn you that contesting this matter will only result in additional legal fees you cannot possibly afford. Be sensible, Miss Thompson. Accept the situation. I am not a cruel man. I will give you $200 to help you resettle elsewhere. It is more than generous under the circumstances." $200. Her father's life work, reduced to less than the cost of a decent horse. Beatrice stood, her legs shaking but her spine straight. "I will be examining those documents, and I will be finding another lawyer to review this matter." Whitmore's practiced sympathy evaporated, replaced by something colder. "There are only 2 other lawyers in this county, Miss Thompson. Both are colleagues of mine. I doubt you will find anyone willing to oppose me in this matter, especially not for a client with no means to pay them. But please, waste what little money you have left if it gives you comfort." She walked out without another word, descending the narrow stairs to the street where the afternoon heat hit her like a physical force. Porterville was a growing town, swollen with people drawn by the promise of land and opportunity in the San Joaquin Valley. The streets were crowded with wagons and horses, with men in dusty work clothes and women in faded calico. Somewhere a blacksmith's hammer rang against an anvil. The smell of bread from the bakery mixed with horse manure and dust. Beatrice had no family left. Her mother had died bringing her into the world. Her father had been everything, and now he was gone, and the home he had built was being stolen by a man whose hands had never known honest work. She made her way to the courthouse, a sturdy brick building that represented the only real authority in the county. Inside, a clerk with ink-stained fingers led her to the records room and helped her locate the file. The documents were there, exactly as Whitmore had said. Her father's signature appeared on page after page, authorizing Harold Whitmore to represent him in matters that were described in the vaguest possible terms. And there, in her father's handwriting, an agreement that the ranch and all its assets would serve as collateral for legal fees. But something was wrong. Beatrice had helped her father with ranch paperwork for years. She knew his handwriting as well as her own. The signature was right, but the hand that had written the body of the agreements was different, more cramped and careful. Only the signatures matched. "Can I make copies of these?" she asked the clerk. "Costs 10 cents a page," he replied. She had exactly $4.30 to her name. She selected the 3 most important documents and paid the clerk, then walked back out into the brutal sunshine with the papers tucked into her bag. The ranch was a half-day's ride south. She had left their wagon at the livery stable, along with the 2 horses her father had kept for personal use. When she arrived at the stable, she found the owner, a gray, bearded man named Chester, waiting with an uncomfortable expression. "Miss Thompson," he said before she could speak, "I am awful sorry, but I received notice from Harold Whitmore this morning. He says the horses and wagon belong to him now as part of your father's estate. Says I cannot release them to you without his permission." The ground seemed to drop away beneath her feet. "Those are my horses. My father taught me to ride on the mare." "I know, miss, and I feel terrible about it, but Whitmore has the legal documents. If I give you the horses, he will have the sheriff on me. I got a business to protect." Beatrice stood in the stable yard, surrounded by the smell of hay and horse and leather, and felt the full weight of her situation settle onto her shoulders. No home, no horses, no money, no way to even reach the ranch that was supposedly no longer hers. "I understand," she said quietly. "Thank you for your honesty, Chester." She walked back toward the center of town, her mind racing. She needed help, but Whitmore was right that no other lawyer would take her case without payment. She needed evidence that the documents were fraudulent, but she had no idea how to prove it. She needed time, but Whitmore had given her only until the end of the week. The hotel where she had taken a room after her father's death was a modest establishment that catered to travelers and cowhands. It cost her 50 cents a night, money she could not afford to spend. She climbed the stairs to her small room and sat on the narrow bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. A knock on the door startled her from her thoughts. She opened it to find the hotel owner's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson. "Begging your pardon, Miss Thompson, but there is a gentleman downstairs asking after you. Says his name is Isaac Olson and he worked for your father." The name was unfamiliar. Beatrice followed Mrs. Patterson downstairs to the small lobby where a man stood with his hat in his hands. He was tall and lean, probably close to her own age, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His clothes were worn but clean, the clothes of a working cowboy. His eyes were a startling shade of gray-green, and they met hers with a directness that was somehow both respectful and assessing. "Miss Thompson," he said, and his voice had the rough edges of someone who spent more time with cattle than people. "My name is Isaac Olson. I worked for your father these past 8 months. I was out on the range when he took sick, did not hear about his passing until I rode into town this morning. I am real sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." "Thank you," Beatrice said. "I appreciate you coming to pay your respects." Isaac shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "It is more than that, miss. I rode out to the ranch this morning to collect my pay and my gear. Found Harold Whitmore there with 4 men, taking inventory of everything. He told me the ranch belongs to him now, told me to clear out. Said he did not need any hands because he is planning to sell the whole operation." "Is that true?" The anger in his voice was barely controlled. Beatrice gestured to a pair of chairs in the corner of the lobby, away from the desk where Mrs. Patterson was pretending not to listen. "It seems to be true," she said once they were seated. "Whitmore claims my father owed him money for legal services. He has documents that supposedly prove it, documents filed with the county. He is taking everything." Isaac's jaw tightened. "Your father never mentioned any legal trouble to me. He talked about you constantly, about how he was building the ranch for you, how you would run it after he was gone. He was teaching you everything. That is what he said." "He was," Beatrice said, and her voice broke slightly on the words. She steadied herself. "But apparently he signed documents giving Whitmore claim to everything. I have seen the signatures. They look legitimate, but something feels wrong about it." "What are you going to do?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I have no money for another lawyer. No evidence beyond a feeling that this is not right. Whitmore has given me until the end of the week to leave town." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his rough hands turning his hat over and over. Then he looked up at her, and she saw something fierce in those gray-green eyes. "I do not believe your father would have done this to you," he said. "I only worked for him 8 months, but I could see what kind of man he was. He was honest. He was proud of you. He would not have signed away everything you should inherit." "But the documents exist," Beatrice said. "With his signature." "Then maybe the signature is forged. Or maybe he was tricked into signing something he did not understand. Or maybe Whitmore waited until your father was dying and got him to sign when he was too sick to know what he was doing." Isaac leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "I am a cowboy, Miss Thompson, not a lawyer, but I know wrong when I see it, and this is wrong. If you are willing to fight, I will help you." Beatrice stared at him. "You do not even know me. Why would you risk going against Whitmore?" "Because your father gave me a job when I needed one. Because he treated me fair and paid me honest wages. Because I know what it is like to have nothing and no one to stand with you." He met her eyes steadily. "And because letting a snake like Whitmore get away with this would stick in my craw for the rest of my life. If you are willing to fight, you should not have to do it alone." Something in Beatrice's chest loosened slightly, the crushing isolation of the past few days easing just a fraction. "What can we do? I have almost no money. Whitmore has the law on his side." "The law is not always the same as justice," Isaac said. "First thing is, we need to figure out the truth. If those documents are forged or fraudulent, there has to be a way to prove it. Second, we need to buy you time. If Whitmore is kicking you off the ranch and out of town, it will be a lot harder to fight him." "He has already contacted the livery stable," Beatrice said. "I cannot even get my own horses because he claims they belong to him now." Isaac's expression darkened. "He moves fast." "That means he is worried about something. A man with legitimate documents does not usually move that quick to shut down any opposition." "So what do we do first?" "First, you let me buy you supper," Isaac said, standing. "You look like you have not eaten properly in days. Then we figure out our next move. But I promise you this, Miss Thompson. We will find a way to prove what Whitmore did, and we will get back what is yours." They went to a small restaurant 2 streets over where cowhands and working people gathered. The food was simple but good, beef stew and fresh bread. Beatrice realized Isaac was right, that she had barely eaten since her father's death. As she ate, Isaac told her about himself. He had grown up in Nevada, the youngest son of a mining family. When the silver played out, his family had scattered. He had worked his way south, taking jobs on ranches and learning the cattle business. He was 25 years old, owned nothing but his saddle and his skills, but he was content with that life. He had arrived at the Thompson Ranch in September of last year, looking for winter work. Richard Thompson had hired him on the spot. "Your father saw something in people," Isaac said. "He gave chances. Not every ranch owner does that. Some men, they hire you, but they never trust you, always looking over your shoulder. Your father, he taught you what you needed to know, and then he let you do your job. He respected his workers." "He was a good man," Beatrice said softly, "the best man I have ever known." "Then we owe it to him to make this right." They talked until the restaurant began to empty, and the owner started giving them meaningful looks. Isaac paid for the meal over Beatrice's protests, saying he had 8 months of wages saved up and nowhere particular to spend it. Out on the street, the evening had cooled the air to something almost comfortable. The sky was turning purple over the distant Sierra Nevada mountains. "I have a room at a boarding house near the edge of town," Isaac said. "Not fancy, but it is cheap. Tomorrow morning, I will start asking questions. There are other hands who worked for your father over the years, people in town who knew him. Maybe someone knows something about these supposed legal troubles. Meanwhile, you should go through everything you remember from the past year. Any conversations, any visitors to the ranch, anything unusual." "Whitmore said my father came to him 6 months ago," Beatrice said. "In November, but I do not remember anything different about that time. My father was healthy, the ranch was doing well. We had a good calf crop that spring. No problems with rustlers or predators, nothing that would require a lawyer. So maybe Whitmore is lying about when your father supposedly hired him, or maybe your father went to see him about something minor and Whitmore turned it into something bigger." Isaac's expression was grim. "Men like that, they see opportunity where honest folks see a handshake. Tomorrow we start digging. Get some rest, Miss Thompson. You look exhausted." "Thank you," Beatrice said, and she meant it with her whole heart. "I do not know how I can repay you for this." "Get your ranch back," Isaac said. "That will be payment enough." Beatrice did try to rest, but sleep came in fitful patches interrupted by dreams of her father and memories of Whitmore's cold eyes. When dawn came, she was already awake, sitting at the small table by the window and going through every document she had managed to grab from the ranch before leaving for her father's funeral. There were bills of sale for cattle, receipts from the general store, correspondence with buyers in San Francisco. Everything was neat and organized, exactly like her father had taught her. And nowhere in any of it was there any mention of legal troubles or meetings with Harold Whitmore. A knock on the door announced Isaac's arrival. He had a cup of coffee for her, purchased from the restaurant, and a determined expression. "I started asking around early this morning," he said. "Talked to 3 of the other hands who have worked for your father over the years. None of them heard anything about legal problems. But one of them, a fellow named Pete Garrison, he said something interesting. He said that last November, a man came through town spreading rumors about your father. Said he was selling cattle without proper bills of sale, implied he might be dealing in stolen stock." Beatrice felt her stomach clench. "That is a serious accusation. It is also completely false. My father was meticulous about documentation." "That is what Pete said too. Said everybody who knew your father dismissed the rumors as nonsense. But here is the thing. Pete remembered who was spreading the rumors. A man named Jack Sullivan, who happens to work for Harold Whitmore as a sort of general assistant and errand runner. Whitmore had someone spread false rumors about my father." Beatrice's mind raced. "Why would he do that?" "Maybe to create a reason why your father would need a lawyer," Isaac said. "Think about it. If people were questioning the legitimacy of his cattle sales, your father might have felt he needed legal representation to protect his reputation. That would give Whitmore an opening. But my father never mentioned any of this to me. Maybe he did not want to worry you. Or maybe he thought he could handle it quietly. Isaac paced the small room. Either way, it gives us a thread to pull. If we can prove Whitmore manufactured a reason to get your father to come to him, it starts to show a pattern of deception. How do we prove it? We find Jack Sullivan, and we make him tell us the truth. Finding Jack Sullivan turned out to be easier than expected. He was a regular presence at the saloons in Porterville, a man in his 30s with a mean streak and a fondness for whiskey. Isaac tracked him down at a gambling table in the Lucky Dollar Saloon that afternoon. Beatrice waited outside while Isaac went in. She had wanted to confront Sullivan herself, but Isaac had pointed out that a lone woman in a saloon would attract attention, and they did not want Whitmore hearing about their investigation. 20 minutes later, Isaac emerged with skinned knuckles and a grim expression. What happened? Beatrice asked. Sullivan got mouthy when I asked him about the rumors. Things escalated. Isaac flexed his hand, wincing. But before the bartender threw us both out, I got something useful. Sullivan admitted he was paid by Whitmore to spread those rumors last November. Said it was just business, nothing personal. He seemed to think it was funny. Can he testify to that? Not willingly. And anything he said could be dismissed as the word of a drunk against a respected lawyer. But it confirms what we suspected. Whitmore set your father up. They walked through the streets of Porterville, trying to figure out their next move. The town was busy with the traffic of a Thursday afternoon. Wagons rolled past carrying goods from the farms and ranches of the valley. Children ran between the buildings, shouting and playing. Life continued, indifferent to Beatrice's crisis. The documents, Beatrice said suddenly. You said something yesterday about the signatures being forged. I have been thinking about that. The signatures on the papers look like my father's hand, but the text of the agreements is different. The writing is not his style. You think Whitmore had him sign blank pages and then filled in the details later, or he forged the whole thing. I do not know enough about handwriting to prove it, but there must be someone who does. Isaac snapped his fingers. There is. The county has a magistrate who sometimes works as an examiner for disputed documents. Fellow named Howard Green. He is based out of Fresno, but he travels through the county regular. If we could get him to examine the documents and compare them to samples of your father's genuine writing, he might be able to prove forgery. Would Whitmore allow it? We do not ask Whitmore. The documents are filed with the county. They are public record. We have as much right to have them examined as anyone. Hope sparked in Beatrice's chest, the first real hope she had felt since entering Whitmore's office. How do we find this magistrate? I will ask around, find out when he is next due in the area. Meanwhile, you gather every sample of your father's genuine handwriting you can find. Letters, notes, anything with his signature and his hand. They split up, Isaac heading off to make inquiries while Beatrice returned to her hotel room to sort through her limited possessions. She had 2 letters her father had written to her during the brief period when she had visited a cousin in Sacramento 3 years ago. She had bills of sale with his signature. She had a birthday note he had written her on her 20th birthday. As she laid out the documents, she noticed something that made her hands start to shake. The signature on the birthday note was identical to the signatures on Whitmore's documents, but in the note, her father had added a small decorative flourish, a tiny loop at the end of the final letter. It was something he had always done in personal correspondence, a habit so automatic he probably did not even think about it. The signatures on Whitmore's documents had no such flourish. It was a small detail, the kind of thing most people would miss. But to Beatrice, who had seen her father's writing thousands of times, it was significant. The signatures on Whitmore's documents were good forgeries, but they were forgeries nonetheless. She was still examining the documents when Isaac returned, his expression excited. "Green is in Fresno right now, but he is due to visit Porterville next week for a case. That is too late if Whitmore is kicking you out of town by the end of the week. But I have another idea. We go to Fresno ourselves. We bring the documents, we bring your samples, and we ask Green to examine them." "Fresno is 50 miles away," Beatrice said. "I do not have a horse. I barely have money for another night in this hotel. I have a horse. You can ride double with me. It will not be comfortable, but it can be done in a day if we start early. As for money, I have enough for both of us." He held up a hand when she started to protest. "You can pay me back when you get your ranch back. Consider it an investment." Beatrice looked at this man who had appeared in her life just yesterday, who was offering to help her without any expectation of reward beyond doing what was right. His eyes were steady, his expression earnest. She barely knew him, but her father had trusted him, and right now that was enough. "When do we leave?" "Dawn tomorrow. Pack light." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Isaac visited the general store to purchase supplies for the journey. Beatrice carefully packed the documents into a leather satchel along with the samples of her father's writing. That evening, Isaac introduced her to his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Copper. "He is a good horse," Isaac said, stroking Copper's neck. "Strong and steady, he will carry us both without complaint." "I have ridden all my life," Beatrice said, "but never double like that." "You will ride in front. I will handle the reins. Try to get some sleep tonight. It will be a long day tomorrow." Beatrice did sleep, more soundly than she had since her father's death. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the simple relief of having a plan, someone on her side. When Isaac knocked on her door before dawn, she was already dressed and ready. They rode out of Porterville as the sun was just beginning to paint the eastern sky pink and gold. The valley stretched out around them, vast and flat, broken by scattered oaks and the occasional farmhouse. The air was cool and fresh, smelling of grass and dust. Riding double was awkward at first. Beatrice sat in front of Isaac, very aware of his proximity, of the strength in his arms as he held the reins around her. But as the miles passed and Copper settled into a steady pace, she relaxed slightly. They did not talk much, saving their energy for the journey. By mid-morning the sun was fierce, turning the valley into a furnace. They stopped to water Copper at a creek and to rest in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Isaac shared out bread and cheese from his supplies, along with a canteen of water. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Well enough," Beatrice said. "This reminds me of riding out on the range with my father. He used to take me on these long trips to check the fences and the water sources. Sometimes we would be gone all day. You miss him a lot, every minute." She looked out across the shimmering landscape. "He was everything to me. My mother died when I was born, so it was always just the two of us. He raised me, taught me everything. He never treated me like I was less capable because I was a girl. He expected me to learn and work and carry my share. The ranch was supposed to be mine someday. Now some lawyer is taking it and my father is not here to stop it." Isaac was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We will stop it. One way or another we will make this right." The certainty in his voice steadied her. They rode on. Fresno was larger than Porterville, a bustling town that served as a hub for the valley. They arrived in late afternoon, both of them dusty and sore from the long ride. Isaac found a livery stable for Copper, then led Beatrice to the courthouse, a substantial building that proclaimed Fresno's growing importance. Inside, a clerk directed them to Magistrate Howard Green's office on the second floor. Green was a small, precise man in his 50s with wire-rimmed spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He listened carefully as Beatrice explained her situation, his expression neutral. "You are asking me to examine documents that have already been filed and accepted by the county," he said when she finished. "That is a serious matter, Miss Thompson. If I find evidence of forgery, it could result in criminal charges." "That is exactly what I am hoping for," Beatrice said. "I believe Harold Whitmore forged my father's signature, or at the very least deceived him into signing documents under false pretenses. I have samples of my father's genuine writing for comparison." Green studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. I will need the original documents from the county records. You will need to request them formally and have them brought here for examination. That process will take several days." "I do not have several days," Beatrice said desperately. "Whitmore has given me until the end of this week to vacate my father's property. If I cannot prove fraud by then, I will lose everything." Green frowned. "I cannot circumvent proper procedures, Miss Thompson, no matter how sympathetic I am to your situation. The law must be followed." "What if we could bring Whitmore here?" Isaac said suddenly. "What if we could force him to produce the original documents himself, right now, for examination?" "How would you do that?" "Leave that to me," Isaac said. "Magistrate Green, if we could get Whitmore and the documents here by tomorrow, could you examine them?" Green considered. "If both parties are present and willing, I could conduct an informal examination. It would not be an official court proceeding, but it would give us a starting point. If I found evidence of forgery, we could then initiate formal proceedings." "That is all we need," Isaac said. He turned to Beatrice. "Trust me on this. I have an idea." They left the courthouse and found a small hotel where they took 2 rooms. Isaac would not explain his plan, saying only that he needed to send a telegram and that she should get some rest. "Tomorrow could be the most important day of your life," he said. "You need to be sharp." Beatrice tried to rest, but her mind was racing. What was Isaac planning? How could they possibly force Whitmore to come to Fresno? And if they failed, what would she do in the morning? Isaac appeared with coffee and fresh bread, his expression determined. "I sent a telegram last night," he said, "to Harold Whitmore. I told him I was a cattle buyer from San Francisco, interested in purchasing your father's entire herd. I said I was in Fresno on business and wanted to meet today to discuss terms. I offered a premium price if we could settle the matter quickly." Beatrice stared at him. "You think he will come?" "A man like Whitmore. He will come. He wants to sell everything as fast as possible and pocket the money. The chance to do it all in one transaction for premium prices. He will not be able to resist. But when he gets here and realizes it is a trick, by then, we will have him in front of Magistrate Green. We will demand he produce the original documents for examination before we proceed with any purchase. He will have to comply or look suspicious." It was audacious and risky and possibly brilliant. Beatrice felt a rush of gratitude and something else, something warmer as she looked at Isaac. This man who barely knew her was putting himself on the line, risking who knew what consequences, all to help her. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know what I would have done without you." Isaac met her eyes and something passed between them, some connection that went beyond the practical matter of fighting Whitmore. "You would have found a way," he said. "You are stronger than you think." They spent the morning at the courthouse, explaining Isaac's plan to Magistrate Green. The magistrate was dubious, but willing to go along with it. He agreed to be present when Whitmore arrived, and to insist on examining the documents if the opportunity arose. At noon, a clerk brought news that a telegram had arrived in response to Isaac's message. Harold Whitmore would arrive on the afternoon train and would be pleased to meet to discuss the sale of the Thompson cattle. Beatrice felt her heart pounding. This was it. Everything would be decided in the next few hours. Whitmore arrived at 3 o'clock, stepping off the train in a fine suit and polished shoes, looking every inch the successful lawyer. He was accompanied by Jack Sullivan, who carried a leather case. Whitmore's expression was smug and confident as he scanned the platform. When he saw Beatrice and Isaac waiting, that confidence evaporated. "What is this?" Whitmore demanded. "I was supposed to meet with a cattle buyer." "You are meeting with us," Isaac said calmly. "And with Magistrate Howard Green, who is waiting in his office to discuss some irregularities in the documents you filed claiming ownership of the Thompson estate." Whitmore's face flushed red. "This is entrapment. This is harassment. I will have the sheriff on you." "You are welcome to leave," Beatrice said, her voice clear and strong. "But if you do, I will file a formal complaint with the State Attorney General, alleging fraud and forgery. I will pursue this through every legal channel available. Or you can come with us now. Allow Magistrate Green to examine your documents, and if everything is legitimate as you claim, you will be free to continue selling my father's property." Whitmore's eyes darted between them, calculating. Sullivan shifted nervously beside him. "This is absurd," Whitmore said. "The documents have already been accepted by the county." "Then you should have no objection to a magistrate examining them," Isaac said, "unless there is something you are afraid he will find." Whitmore stared at them for a long moment. Then, clearly deciding that refusing would look worse than complying, he nodded curtly. "Very well. I have nothing to hide. Let us get this over with." They walked to the courthouse in tense silence. Magistrate Green was waiting in a room normally used for depositions. He had arranged a large table with good light from the window. He greeted Whitmore with professional courtesy, then got directly to business. "Mr. Whitmore, I understand you have filed documents with the Tulare County Clerk claiming ownership of the Richard Thompson estate. I have been asked to examine those documents for authenticity. Do you have the originals with you?" "I have copies," Whitmore said. "The originals are filed with the county." "Copies will not suffice for a handwriting examination," Green said. "I need to see the original signatures." "This is highly irregular. Those documents are not in question. They have been properly filed and accepted." "Nevertheless, Miss Thompson has the right to request an examination. If you wish to avoid a formal legal challenge, I suggest you cooperate." Green's voice was mild but firm. "I can have the county send the documents, but that will take several days and will involve formal proceedings. Or you can produce them now, and we can resolve this matter quickly." Whitmore's jaw worked as he thought. Finally, he turned to Sullivan. "You brought the file." Sullivan hesitated, then nodded and opened the leather case. He pulled out a folder containing several documents and laid them on the table. Beatrice recognized them as the agreements she had seen in the county records office. Green put on his spectacles and began examining the documents carefully. He looked at the signatures, held the paper up to the light, studied the ink and the handwriting. Then he asked Beatrice to provide her samples of her father's genuine writing. She laid out the letters, the bills of sale, the birthday note. Green examined each one, comparing them to the signatures on Whitmore's documents. The room was silent except for the rustle of paper and the ticking of a clock on the wall. After what felt like an eternity, Green sat back and removed his spectacles. "These signatures are forgeries," he said quietly. Whitmore exploded out of his chair. "That is absurd. That is defamation. I will sue you for every penny you have." "Sit down, Mr. Whitmore," Green said, his voice now hard. "I have examined thousands of documents in my career. I know forgery when I see it. The signatures on your documents are good copies, but they are not genuine. The pen pressure is wrong. The flow of the letters is too careful, too studied. Most tellingly, they lack the characteristic flourish that Mr. Thompson used in all his personal correspondence. Someone copied his signature, but they did not know about that small habit. "You are mistaken," Whitmore said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I am not mistaken. Furthermore, even if the signatures were genuine, the fact that the body of these documents is not in Mr. Thompson's handwriting raises serious questions. Either you forged the entire document and copied his signature, or you had him sign blank pages and filled in the terms later. Either way, these documents are fraudulent." "You cannot prove that," Whitmore said desperately. "I can prove it well enough to recommend criminal charges," Green said. He turned to Beatrice. "Miss Thompson, I will prepare a formal report for the district attorney. These documents should be voided immediately, and your father's estate should revert to you as his legal heir. I will also recommend that Mr. Whitmore be investigated for fraud." Beatrice felt tears stinging her eyes, but they were tears of relief and vindication. "Thank you, Magistrate Green. Thank you so much." Whitmore grabbed the documents from the table and backed toward the door. "This is not over. I have rights. I will fight this." "You are welcome to try," Green said, "but I would advise against it. The evidence is clear. If you pursue this further, you will only make things worse for yourself. If I were you, I would return everything you have taken from the Thompson estate immediately and pray that Miss Thompson does not press for criminal prosecution." Whitmore looked at Beatrice, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes. Then he turned and fled the room, Sullivan scrambling after him. As soon as they were gone, Beatrice's legs gave out and she sank into a chair. Isaac was beside her in an instant, his hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he said softly. "You proved he was a fraud. The ranch is yours." "We did it," Beatrice said, looking up at him. "I could never have done this without you. You believed me when no one else would. You risked everything to help me." "I told you," Isaac said, and his eyes were warm. "I know wrong when I see it, and I know right when I see it too." "You are right, Beatrice. You deserve justice. You deserve your father's legacy." Magistrate Green prepared the necessary documents that afternoon. He wrote a formal report declaring Whitmore's documents fraudulent and recommending that the Tulare County Court void all claims against the Thompson estate. He gave Beatrice copies to take with her, along with a letter of introduction to the county sheriff. "Take these to Sheriff Morrison in Porterville," Green said. "He is a good man. He will ensure that Whitmore returns everything he has taken. And Miss Thompson, I am truly sorry for your loss. Your father sounds like he was a remarkable man." "He was," Beatrice said. "And I intend to honor his memory by running the ranch the way he taught me." They stayed in Fresno that night. Isaac insisted on taking Beatrice to a proper restaurant to celebrate, a place with white tablecloths and candles. It was the finest meal Beatrice had eaten in weeks, but she barely tasted the food. She was too aware of Isaac sitting across from her, of the way the candlelight caught in his eyes, of the quiet strength in his presence. "What will you do now?" she asked him. "Once the ranch is returned to me, will you go back to drifting from job to job?" Isaac was quiet for a moment. "I had not thought that far ahead. I suppose I will need to find work. There are always ranches hiring." "My ranch will need a foreman," Beatrice said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "Someone who knows cattle and horses, someone I can trust. The pay would be fair, and there is a house on the property, a small place but solid. If you wanted it, the job is yours." Isaac looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "Are you sure? You do not owe me anything, Beatrice. I helped because it was right, not because I expected payment." I know that, but I am not offering this out of obligation. I am offering it because you are exactly the kind of man my father would have wanted running his ranch. You are honest and capable, and you care about doing things right. And besides," she said, her voice dropping, "I've gotten used to having you around. I would miss you if you left." The air between them seemed to thicken. Isaac reached across the table and took her hand, his rough fingers gentle. "I would like that," he said. "I would like that very much." They rode back to Porterville the next day, arriving in the afternoon dusty and tired but triumphant. Sheriff Morrison read Magistrate Green's report with growing anger, then immediately dispatched deputies to find Harold Whitmore. Whitmore had not left town. He was found in his office, apparently attempting to pack his belongings. When confronted with Green's report and the threat of criminal prosecution, he collapsed like a punctured bladder. He admitted to forging the documents, to spreading false rumors about Richard Thompson, to planning to sell the ranch and pocket the profits. He claimed he had done it because he was in debt, because he needed money desperately, because he had not thought anyone would question his claim. "He made it sound like your father was already dead when he forged the documents," Sheriff Morrison told Beatrice later. "Like it did not really hurt anyone, but I think the truth is worse. I think he forged those documents while your father was still alive, probably planning to wait until after his death to file them. He just got lucky that your father took sick when he did." "Or not lucky," Isaac said darkly. "A man in Whitmore's position would have easy access to certain substances that could make a healthy man suddenly take ill." Morrison's eyes widened. "Are you suggesting he poisoned Richard Thompson?" "I am suggesting it is worth investigating," Isaac said. "Especially if Whitmore was seen near the Thompson ranch in the days before Mr. Thompson took sick." The investigation took 2 weeks. Whitmore, facing the threat of a murder charge in addition to fraud, finally broke down and confessed everything. He had been embezzling from clients for years, accumulating debts he could not repay. When he learned about the valuable Thompson ranch, he had hatched a plan to steal it. He had spread rumors to create a pretext for Richard Thompson to need legal help. When Thompson had indeed come to him the previous November to ask about defending his reputation, Whitmore had seen his opportunity. He had kept Thompson coming back to his office with invented complications and legal necessities. Each visit, he had Thompson sign more documents, telling him they were routine paperwork. Some of those documents had been blank, to be filled in later. Others had been the fraudulent agreements themselves, written in deliberately confusing legal language that hid their true nature. And then, when Thompson had still been healthy and likely to live another 20 years, Whitmore had grown impatient. He had visited the ranch in late April, ostensibly to deliver some papers. He had brought a bottle of whiskey as a gift, expensive stuff, that Richard Thompson had been too polite to refuse. The whiskey had been laced with arsenic, not enough to kill quickly, but enough to cause the fever and weakness that had taken Thompson's life over the course of a week. It was cold-blooded murder, motivated by nothing but greed. Whitmore was arrested and taken to the county jail to await trial. The district attorney assured Beatrice that he would be convicted and would likely hang for his crimes. As for the Thompson estate, it was immediately restored to Beatrice as her father's rightful heir. The day Beatrice rode back out to the ranch, Isaac beside her, was one of the most emotional of her life. The house looked the same as when she had left it, a sturdy structure of wood and stone with a wide porch. The barn stood solid and red against the green of the valley. The cattle grazed in the pastures, sleek and healthy. It was home, her father's legacy, now hers to protect and grow. She stood in the main room of the house, surrounded by her father's belongings, and finally allowed herself to cry. Isaac held her while she wept, his arms strong and steady until the storm of grief passed and she could breathe again. "He would be proud of you," Isaac said. "You fought for what was right. You did not give up, even when it looked impossible. That took courage." "I could not have done it without you," Beatrice said. She looked up at him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "Stay, Isaac, please stay. Not just as a foreman, but as a partner. Help me run this place. Help me build it into something my father would be proud of." "I am not going anywhere," Isaac said. "I promise you that." Over the following months, they worked together to restore the ranch to full operation. Isaac proved to be everything Beatrice had hoped, skilled and hardworking and full of good ideas. He hired back the hands who had worked for her father, men who were grateful for the employment and loyal to the Thompson name. He organized the cattle drives, negotiated with buyers, maintained the equipment and buildings. But it was more than just business. As spring turned to summer and summer to fall, Beatrice and Isaac grew closer in ways that had nothing to do with ranching. They took long rides together across the property, talking about everything and nothing. They ate dinner together every evening, sharing the events of the day. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the valley, comfortable in the silence. It was Isaac who finally put words to what had been growing between them. It was a warm evening in October, nearly 6 months after they had first met. They were sitting on the porch, and Isaac was telling her about his plans for the winter pastures. He stopped mid-sentence and turned to look at her. "Beatrice," he said, and his voice was serious. "I need to tell you something." Her heart started to beat faster. "What is it?" "I am in love with you. I have been for months, probably since that first day when you decided to fight instead of giving up. I know this might not be what you want to hear, that maybe you just see me as a friend and a business partner. But I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way. You are the strongest, bravest, most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes again, but these were tears of joy. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have loved you since you walked into that hotel lobby and offered to help me when everyone else had turned away. You gave me hope when I had none. You believed in me. You stood by me. How could I not love you?" Isaac pulled her close and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. It felt like the future her father would have wanted for her, a future of love and partnership, and building something worthwhile together. They were married in December in a simple ceremony at the church in Porterville. The entire town turned out, eager to celebrate the woman who had fought Harold Whitmore and won. Whitmore himself was still in jail, awaiting his trial. He would be convicted the following spring and hanged in the summer. Justice finally served for the murder of Richard Thompson. But that dark chapter was behind them now. Beatrice and Isaac stood together at the altar, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, and when they kissed as husband and wife, the church erupted in cheers. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Beatrice handled the business side, managing the accounts and the contracts, while Isaac oversaw the day-to-day operations. They complemented each other perfectly. Her organizational skills matched with his practical knowledge. Within 2 years, they had expanded the herd and purchased additional land. Within 5 years, the Thompson Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the valley. But more important than the success of the business was the family they built. Their first child, a son they named Richard after Beatrice's father, was born in the summer of 1880. He had his mother's dark hair and his father's gray-green eyes. 2 years later came a daughter, Emma, with blonde curls and a sunny disposition. Then another son, James, strong and serious like his father. Beatrice stood on the porch of the ranch house one evening in the spring of 1886, watching her children play in the yard while Isaac worked with the horses in the corral. 8 years had passed since that terrible day when she had learned that Whitmore had stolen everything. 8 years since Isaac had walked into her life and changed it forever. The ranch was thriving. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. The barns were full of livestock and equipment. The pastures were green and lush. Everything her father had built was not only preserved but growing stronger. But more than that, she had built a life filled with love and purpose. She had a husband who respected her, who loved her, who was her true partner in every sense of the word. She had children who would grow up learning the land the way she had, who would carry on the family legacy. She had friends in the community, a reputation for fairness and integrity that her father would have been proud of. Isaac finished with the horses and walked over to join her on the porch. He put his arm around her waist and kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," she said. "How different my life could have been if you had not decided to help me. How grateful I am for every day we have together." "I am the grateful one," Isaac said. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything that matters." They stood together watching the sun set, their children's laughter ringing across the valley, and Beatrice knew that her father's legacy was secure. Not just the ranch, but the values he had instilled in her, honesty and hard work and fighting for what was right. Those values would be passed down to her children and her children's children, a living monument to Richard Thompson's memory. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Isaac led Beatrice inside to help get the children ready for bed. Richard, now 6 years old, begged for a story about his grandfather, and Beatrice sat on his bed and told him about the man who had built the ranch from nothing, who had been honest and kind and brave. "Your grandfather would have loved you so much," she said, smoothing Richard's dark hair back from his forehead. "He would have taught you to ride and rope and work the cattle. He would have been so proud of you." "Did he love you, Mama?" Richard asked. "More than anything in the world," Beatrice said. "And I loved him too. That is why I fought so hard to keep this ranch, to protect what he built. And someday, when you are grown, this ranch will be yours and you will protect it the same way." After the children were asleep, Isaac and Beatrice sat together in the living room. The house was quiet, the fire crackling softly in the hearth. Isaac held Beatrice's hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "You ever wish things had been different?" he asked. "That you had not had to go through all that pain and fighting?" Beatrice considered the question carefully. "I wish my father had not been murdered. I wish he could have met you, could have seen our children. But as for the rest, no. Fighting for the ranch taught me what I was capable of. It taught me that I could stand up for myself, that I was stronger than I knew, and it brought you into my life. I would not trade that for anything." "I would do it all again," Isaac said. "Every moment, because it led me here to you, to this life we have built together." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the California night was full of stars, the same stars that had watched over the ranch for all these years, the same stars that would watch over it for generations to come. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and cycles. The children grew, learning the land and the work. Richard became a skilled horseman, just like his grandfather. Emma developed a talent for managing the ranch accounts, sitting at her mother's desk and working through the numbers with the same precision Beatrice had learned from her father. James, the youngest, showed an aptitude for dealing with people, charming buyers and negotiating deals with a natural ease. In 1891, when a drought threatened the valley and many ranches struggled, The Thompson Ranch was prepared because Beatrice and Isaac had followed Richard Thompson's philosophy of conservative management and careful planning. They helped their neighbors where they could, extending credit and sharing resources, building the kind of community that her father would have valued. In 1895, when Beatrice was 39 years old and Isaac was 42, they welcomed one final addition to their family, a surprise daughter they named Grace. The older children doted on their baby sister, and watching them together, Beatrice felt her heart swell with gratitude for the life she had been given. Harold Whitmore was long dead by then, his name remembered only as a cautionary tale about greed and corruption. The Thompson name, by contrast, stood for integrity and resilience. When people in Porterville talked about the ranch, they spoke of Beatrice and Isaac's success with admiration and respect. On what would have been Richard Thompson's 70th birthday, Beatrice rode out to the small family cemetery on the edge of the ranch property. Her father was buried there beneath a simple stone that read, "Richard Thompson, 1828–1878, beloved father and honorable man." She had added stones for her mother, whom she had never known, and had reserved spaces for herself and Isaac when their time came. She stood by her father's grave, her hand resting on the sun-warmed stone. "I hope I have made you proud, Papa," she said softly. "I kept the ranch. I built it into something even stronger. I married a good man who loves me and respects me. I raised children who know the value of honest work. I did what you taught me to do. I fought for what was right, and I never gave up." The wind whispered through the grass, and somewhere a meadowlark sang. Beatrice felt a sense of peace settle over her, a certainty that her father knew wherever he was, that his legacy was secure in her hands. Isaac found her there an hour later. He had ridden out from the house, knowing where she would be. He dismounted and came to stand beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You have made him proud," Isaac said, as if reading her thoughts. "Anyone can see that. The ranch is thriving. Your children are good people. You have built something that will last for generations." "That is the best tribute you could give him." "We built it," Beatrice corrected. "You and I together. I could never have done any of this without you." "We are a team," Isaac agreed. "Always have been from that first day, you and me against the world." They rode back to the house together as the sun began to set, painting the valley in shades of gold and amber. The house came into view, smoke rising from the chimney, lights glowing in the windows. Their children were visible in the yard, Richard teaching James some finer points of roping while Emma sat on the porch steps with little Grace on her lap. It was everything Beatrice had ever wanted, everything her father had hoped for her, a life of love and purpose and belonging. That night, after the children were in bed, Beatrice and Isaac sat on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air cool and sweet. Isaac held her hand and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "You remember that first day?" Beatrice asked. "When you came to the hotel and offered to help me?" "Of course I remember. You looked so lost and so determined at the same time. I knew right then that you were someone special, someone worth fighting for." "I thought I had lost everything," Beatrice said. "My father, my home, my future. And then you appeared and gave me hope. You believed in me when I was struggling to believe in myself." "You did the hard part," Isaac said. "You had the courage to fight. I just walked beside you. You did more than that. You gave me a reason to keep going. And then you gave me love, a family, a life better than anything I could have imagined." Isaac turned to face her, his rough hands cupping her face gently. "You are the love of my life, Beatrice Thompson Olson. You always will be. From that first day until my last day, I am yours." She kissed him, deep and long, putting into that kiss all the love and gratitude and joy she felt. When they finally pulled apart, she could see tears shining in his eyes, matching the ones in her own. "And I am yours," she whispered, "forever and always." The seasons continued their endless cycle. Winter turned to spring, spring to summer, summer to fall, and back to winter again. The children grew into adults, each finding their own path while remaining connected to the ranch and the family legacy. Richard married a woman from Fresno and brought her back to help run the ranch. Emma married a lawyer from Sacramento, a good man who reminded Beatrice nothing of Harold Whitmore, and they visited often with their children. James went east to study business but returned within 5 years, unable to stay away from the land he loved. Grace, the baby of the family, grew into a spirited young woman who had her mother's determination and her father's easy charm. In 1910, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Beatrice with a new headstone for her father's grave. It was grander than the original, made of polished granite, and it included an addition to the inscription. "His legacy lives on in his daughter and her family." Beatrice wept when she saw it, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture and by the truth of those words. Her father's legacy did live on, not just in the ranch but in the values she and Isaac had instilled in their children, in the community they had built, in the life of integrity and purpose they had created together. They stood together by the grave, now both in their 50s, their hair touched with gray, their bodies marked by years of hard work. But the love between them was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger, tempered by 3 decades of partnership and shared challenges and mutual support. "Thank you," Beatrice said, holding Isaac's hand, "for everything, for believing in me, for loving me, for building this life with me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "The honor has been mine," Isaac said, "every single day." As they grew older, they gradually turned more of the day-to-day operations over to Richard and the other children. But they never stopped being involved, never stopped caring about the ranch that had brought them together. They spent their days riding the property, checking on the cattle and the fences, sitting on the porch in the evenings watching the grandchildren play. In 1918, as the world was torn apart by war, the Thompson Ranch remained a haven of peace and stability. They sent food to support the war effort and prayed for the safe return of friends and neighbors who had gone to fight. When the war finally ended, they celebrated with the whole community, grateful for peace and for the resilience of the human spirit. On a cool evening in October 1920, 42 years after they had first met, Beatrice and Isaac sat on the porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 60s now, their children grown with families of their own, their grandchildren running wild across the ranch that had been the foundation of everything. "You remember when we first sat on this porch together?" Isaac asked. "After we had gotten the ranch back, when we were just starting to build our life together." "I remember everything," Beatrice said. "Every conversation, every moment. You are written into my soul, Isaac Olson." "And you into mine," he replied. "I have never regretted a single day of the life we have built, not one moment of it." "Neither have I," Beatrice said. "My father would have loved you so much. He would have been grateful that you took care of me, that you helped me protect his legacy." "I did not do it for him," Isaac said gently. "I did it for you. I saw a woman in trouble, a woman who deserved better than what life had dealt her, and I wanted to help. And then I fell in love with you, and everything else just followed from that." Beatrice leaned against him, feeling the strength in his body, the steady beat of his heart. "We have had a good life, you and I, a very good life." "The best," Isaac agreed. They sat in peaceful silence as the stars emerged one by one. The same stars that had watched over the ranch through all the years, through all the joys and sorrows and triumphs. The house behind them was full of love and laughter, full of children and grandchildren who carried forward the legacy of Richard Thompson and the love story of Beatrice and Isaac. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. A horse nickered in the barn. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the scent of earth and growing things. Everything that had been nearly lost was not only preserved but flourishing, a testament to courage and determination and the power of love. Beatrice closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer of gratitude for her father who had given her roots, for Isaac who had given her wings, for the life they had built together against all odds. She had started with nothing but a stolen inheritance and a determination not to give up. She had ended with everything that truly mattered: love, family, purpose, and a legacy that would endure for generations. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars burned bright overhead, Isaac squeezed her hand gently. She squeezed back, a wordless communication of the love that had sustained them through 4 decades of marriage, through challenges and triumphs, through the ordinary miracle of building a life together. They stood and walked into the house hand in hand, ready for whatever the future would bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. The ranch was safe, the family was thriving, and the love that had started on a desperate day in a hotel lobby had grown into something eternal, something that would outlast them both and live on in the hearts of their children and their children's children. The door closed softly behind them, and the porch was empty except for the 2 chairs rocking gently in the evening breeze, silent witnesses to a love story that had changed everything, that had transformed loss into gain, despair into hope, loneliness into belonging. Inside the house, laughter rang out as the family gathered around the dinner table. 3 generations of Thompsons and Olsons, all of them carrying forward the legacy of an honest rancher who had built something worth fighting for, and the woman and the cowboy who had refused to let that legacy be stolen. It was a good ending. It was a happy ending. It was exactly the ending that Richard Thompson would have wanted for his beloved daughter, and exactly the life that Beatrice and Isaac had fought so hard to build together. And as the California night settled over the valley, over the ranch that had been the center of so much struggle and so much love, everything was exactly as it should be. A family together, a legacy preserved, and a love story that would be told for generations to come. The story of how the lawyer tried to steal everything, but the cowboy helped her get back what was hers. And in the process, they found something infinitely more valuable than land or cattle or money. They found each other, and that made all the difference.